It started with a smirk. Greg Gutfeld leaned back in his chair, fired off a line so sharp it drew blood, and the governor of Minnesota, a man once praised for kindergarten teacher calm, lunged for the red-faced retort that would catapult him into viral infamy. Screens lit up worldwide as Tim Walz's voice cracked, his cheeks flushed, and bang! He yanked off his mic and bolted out of frame. Within hours, the clip climbed past 1 million views. Hashtag Walz Meltdown trended, and even late-night rivals replayed the tantrum on loop. What most people missed in that 42-second blow-up was everything that came before it. Years of simmering doubts, scandal breadcrumbs, and what critics call a resume built on half-truths and hard pivots. Gutfeld's roast merely struck the match. The powder keg had been sitting in plain sight. Viewers who rewound the segment noticed the host rattling off a greatest hits list of Walz controversies with the giddy flair of a roast master. The governor, boxed into a corner under studio lights, looked less like a Midwestern dad and more like a cornered brawler who hadn't prepared for every jab. To grasp why that jab landed so cleanly, rewind to the accusations that first dented Walz's folksy soldier-teacher persona. During the 2024 campaign, a Republican oppo drop painted him as a serial embellisher of his National Guard service, hinting he'd let supporters assume he'd deployed to war zones he never actually saw. Politi nerds dubbed it stolen-valor lite, and talk radio hosts ran with it for months. Fact-checkers eventually clarified he'd served honorably for 24 years, but never in Afghanistan. The confusion traced back to a garbled speech where Walz referred to a congressional fact-finding trip as if it were deployment. Walz chalked the uproar up to partisan dirty tricks, yet the story had legs because it touched a nerve: integrity. If a candidate's core brand is soldier next door, any crack in that armor echoes louder. And once viewers sense a wobble, they start tugging at every loose thread. Enter a grainy booking photo from 1995. Walz, age 31, arrested in Nebraska after police clocked him at nearly twice the speed limit with a 0.128 blood alcohol level. He eventually pled down to reckless driving, paid a fine, and surrendered his license for 3 months. Decades later, the mugshot reemerged like a ghost at family dinner, resurfacing in European tabloids, American cable chatter, and endless Twitter memes of Tipsy Tim. Walz has since framed that night as a come-to-Jesus moment. He quit drinking, finished school, and says he dedicated his life to service over self. Yet critics note that, when the incident first bubbled up during his congressional run, campaign aides described it as a mere speeding ticket, omitting the alcohol part until court docs surfaced. Trust once again took a ding. Fast forward to 2020, and the governor wielded emergency powers like a blunt instrument. Minnesota's lockdown ranked among the strictest. Indoor dining shuttered, church doors padlocked, and a hotline, derisively nicknamed the snitch-line, invited neighbors to report one another for violations. The inbox flooded with some 10,000 complaints before officials quietly shut it down. Civil liberties groups howled. Even Florida's Ron DeSantis mocked Walz in press conferences, asking, "Why did you set up a tattletale line if you believe in minding your own business?" While residents stewed under stay-at-home orders, a different storm brewed behind the bureaucracy's doors. A nonprofit called Feeding Our Future siphoned off federal child nutrition funds, splurging on luxury cars, real estate, and lake house renovations. By the time federal prosecutors swooped in, $250 million had evaporated, 47 people faced charges, and media called it the largest COVID fraud in America. Investigators revealed state officials flagged red flags early, yet continued greenlighting payments. House committees later subpoenaed Walz's office for every email and memo explaining the lapse. Each headline chipped away at the governor's everyman sheen, and ordinary Minnesotans started asking the uncomfortable question: did Tim Walz lose the plot? Pandemic fatigue soon met sticker shock. Local papers highlighted a 9.8% corporate tax rate, fourth highest in the nation, while Forbes listed the state economy as relatively weak, blaming high taxes and runaway spending. At the same time, Amazon yanked back a billion-dollar data center project after regulators insisted the company file a costly certificate of need for 250 diesel generators. All of that context brewed just beneath the surface when Walz strode onto Gutfeld. Set in March 2025. The host teased him with a line about a governor who can't keep track of his own millions, let alone your freedoms, and the governor's jaw visibly clenched.
Producers swear they saw steam.
Walz tried to parry with a joke about late-night hosts and ratings, but Gutfeld, sensing blood in the water, shifted to the feeding our future fiasco, the DUI mugshot, and the guard controversy in rapid-fire succession. By the time he cracked, "Tell me, Governor, does the snitch hotline still have a hold button, or did you shut it down because the fraud line was busy?" The studio audience gasped. Walz ripped off his lav mic, mumbled, "This is a circus," and vanished into backstage corridors. Commentators called it the political equivalent of throwing a chair on daytime TV, electrifying for viewers, devastating for brand image. In the first 12 hours, digital impressions eclipsed his entire VP announcement week. Memesmith split-screened the meltdown with the 1995 booking photo, captioning it 2 exits, 30 years apart, same attitude. Pollsters detected a dip in approval among suburban independents who had once appreciated Walz's measured tone. Yet inside Minnesota, many argued the Gutfeld kerfuffle was just a symptom of deeper unrest. Violent crime, though down from the 2021 peak, still hovered above pre-pandemic norms, and carjackings dominated local news tickers. The high-speed Northern Lights Express Rail project, once touted as an economic lifeline between Minneapolis and Duluth, lost $77 million in funding and now sits on life support. Meanwhile, students lagged in math and reading after extended school closures, fueling talk radio rants that Walz prioritized pronoun policies over phonics. And then, as if the script needed a darker twist, June 2025 delivered the unthinkable, a politically motivated shooting that killed House Speaker Melissa Hortman and left Senator John Hoffman fighting for his life. Walz's televised statement, solemn, tear-streaked, and studded with appeals for unity, drew praise for empathy, but was quickly drowned out by critics who labeled his public safety record an open invite to extremists. All these threads converged the night he stormed off Gutfeld's stage, creating a tapestry of doubt few politicians could weave so tightly. And the fallout? That storm was only beginning to gather force. But the storm would only grow. In the tense days after the Capitol shooting, voters wanted a rock-steady hand. Instead, they got a leader whose past missteps were suddenly magnified under an unforgiving spotlight. Cable panels replayed Gutfeld's crack about the snitch hotline in split screen with tearful vigil footage, asking whether years of divisive pandemic policy had primed the state for rage. Conservative radio hammered Walz as the governor who locked up grandmas for bingo night yet couldn't lock down a fraud ring. Progressive outlets, eager to defend him, found themselves sidestepping awkward facts: the missing millions, the stalled bullet train, the surge in carjackings that now felt like the prelude to something darker. At first, Walz's staff tried the classic firebreak: book him on every friendly podcast, crank out human interest reels of him hugging first responders, promise bipartisan security reforms. The charm offensive fizzled. Each softball interview triggered new viral comments dredging up his ballistic exit from Gutfeld's studio. Sure, you can handle terrorism, but a late-night joke sent you sprinting for the door? Hashtags morphed into punchlines. Hashtag RunTimRun trended for 3 days, racking up dance challenge spoofs of the governor bolting past roadside attractions and into Canada. Donors felt the heat. A Minneapolis tech titan quietly yanked his 6-figure pledge, telling reporters, "I can't bankroll a brand that might implode mid-cycle." Labor unions, once Walz's ironclad shield, asked for private calls to clarify your message, code for "don't drag us down with you." Meanwhile, opposition researchers smelled fresh blood. Leaked emails hinted at a long-buried ethics complaint from Walz's early teaching career. Nothing criminal, just whispers he inflated test scores to secure a grant. In normal times, this might glance off. In the current frenzy, even the suggestion of cooked books felt like one more domino. Poll numbers slid 5 points, then 8. Suburban independents who had crossed party lines in 2022 now told focus groups, "He seems rattled, and that rattles me." One woman compared the governor's vibe to a dad who lost the map on a road trip but won't admit it. Late-night satirists piled on. When Stephen Colbert quipped, "Minnesota's motto is now land of 10,000 lakes and one very nervous governor," the studio audience roared, another cut on an already shredded approval rating. Walz's inner circle weighed an overdue reset. They floated the idea of a statewide listening tour, low-key town halls where he could reconnect with everyday voters. Advisors argued it would humanize him. Skeptics warned every stop risked turning into a viral ambush. The first event, held in Duluth, proved the doubters right. Mid-speech, a laid-off steelworker shouted from the back row, "Where'd that feeding our future money go, Governor? Into your re-election ads." The outburst made local news, then national blogs, spawning gifs of Walz blinking, jaw tight, as aides hustled him off stage. While the governor scrambled, a new antagonist emerged: State Attorney General Marissa Devine, a fellow Democrat with ambitions and impeccable timing. She announced an independent task force to review systemic failures that enabled pandemic fraud, pointedly noting that no office, including the governor's, is above scrutiny. Pundits smelled internecine war. Devine's press conference dripped with veiled barbs about leadership by optics and slogans in place of oversight. Overnight, whispers of her eyeing the governor's mansion turned into full-volume speculation. Republicans, sensing gold, launched a recall petition. The threshold looked steep, 650,000 verified signatures, but organizers claimed 100,000 in the first weekend. Walz tried to shrug it off as partisan theater, yet internal memos revealed true worry. If momentum kept pace, the recall could qualify just as the next legislative session opened, freezing his agenda and casting a long shadow over everything else. Through it all, one question followed him like a bad anthem. Why that reaction on Gutfeld? Psychologists on morning shows dissected the body language: tight shoulders, darting eyes, a dry swallow before the fateful mic pull. A viral TikTok framed the clip with dramatic piano, labeling each second with a countdown. Watch the exact frame his composure fractures. Even supporters admitted the governor looked exhausted, brittle, older than his 61 years. Real crises demanded focus. Federal investigators delivered a preliminary report on feeding our future, showing warning emails sent directly to the governor's policy team, titled "Urgent Irregularities," months before indictments. Walz argued staff screened the messages and never escalated, but the optics were brutal. Millions vanished while Minnesotans lined up at food banks. When a local anchor asked if he accepted personal responsibility, Walz sighed, "I am the captain of this ship," a line meant to project accountability. Opponents clipped only the first half, "I am the captain," pairing it with footage of the Titanic. The crescendo came at a mid-June press briefing meant to unveil a crime reduction package. Reporters expected a pivot to policy. Walz delivered a confessional. Voice low, he admitted the Gutfeld incident, exposed stress I hadn't been honest about, revealed he'd entered counseling, and pledged weekly public Q&As, no matter how tough the questions. Some hailed the vulnerability. Others called it a Hail Mary. Yet the very next day, a jury convicted the ringleader in the meal program scheme, reminding everyone of the scandal's scale. The front page headline blared, "Fraud Kingpin faces 25 years. Walz still faces questions." In private, allies urged a bold gamble. Announce he wouldn't seek re-election, focus on policy wins, exit with dignity. The idea hung in the air like smoke, the kind that says a building's about to burn or be saved by a sudden downpour. Walz demurred, citing unfinished work, but a veteran strategist noted, when someone has to say they're not quitting, the mind's already rehearsing the goodbye. As July's heat settled over the Twin Cities, the governor slipped into a pattern of cautious appearances, every word weighed, every grin practiced. Yet even controlled optics couldn't mask a larger truth. Politics is an attention economy, and his narrative had veered from earnest public servant to embattled protagonist in a binge-watch drama. Viewers stay tuned for catastrophe or comeback. Few invest in the middling plateau between. And that leaves the final reel unwritten. Will Tim Walz pull off a late-game turnaround, prove the critics wrong and steer Minnesota out of scandal? Or will the next viral moment seal a downfall set in motion long before one late-night joke detonated on live TV? Whichever path unfolds, one lesson lingers for every leader who believes a calm exterior can weather any storm. Sometimes all it takes is a single punchline, delivered with just the right bite, to expose cracks that were always there, waiting, widening, ready to swallow a reputation whole.